It is here that things took a violent turn.
The men opened the door and took her out. They dragged Barney through the woods to where this craft was waiting.
The Hill's alleged abduction site was nothing but open countryside and forest in 1961.
This was the key moment in which they seem to have crossed from frightened travelers along a dark road at night to actual abductees and subjects of creatures from another planet. They were brought here from the road.
That's correct.
And then taken aboard the ship here.
Under hypnosis, they both revealed that they were taken up a ramp. Betty engaged in a struggle with these men, and this is where her dress was torn. Betty was taken on board the craft. Barney was taken to a room ahead of her.
At which point, they were subjected to various sets of medical experiments.
Medical experiments and specimens were taken from their bodies.
According to her account, Betty asked the alien entity where it came from, and was shown a three-dimensional map of stars connected by a variety of lines. Incredibly, during a hypnosis session over 6 months later, Betty was able to accurately recreate this star map. After the experiments were complete, the Hills alleged they were led back to the car.
Barney was taken down a path to the vehicle. Betty was escorted by the leader down to the vehicle and watched the craft leave.
I was unaware myself of how much they remembered without any kind of aid by a psychiatrist, regression or hypnosis.
In the early morning hours after the incident, September 20th, 1961, the Hills returned home. They knew something had happened, but they could not account for the 2 missing hours. Later that day, Betty noticed something unusual on the dress she wore the previous night. An unknown pink powder coated the dress, even though she had no memory yet of being abducted, and no recollection of coming in contact with the pink powder. Something compelled her to hang the dress in the closet without having it cleaned.
No one bothered to even do any testing in 1961 on any of the evidence. Nobody took a look at Betty's dress in 1961, that dress that was torn at the zipper.
Now this case, as opposed to almost all other abduction cases, actually has some physical evidence that we can look at.
Will analysis of the mysterious pink powder that coated Betty Hill's dress prove conclusively that the Hills were abducted by an alien craft?
This is the seminal key case with the best evidence in all the abduction scenarios around.
The team analyzes a 4-inch by 2-inch sample of the dress to see if traces of pink powder remain.
Skeptics, you just don't know what you're talking about.
The Hills abduction entered popular culture first through the 1966 book, Interrupted Journey. The book became a bestseller when Look magazine serialized the story in its October 4th and 18th issues that same year.
As he stared downward, he seemed very impersonal, and I suddenly felt like a tiny bug waiting to be snatched, like I was some sort of specimen, and it was the eeriest feeling.
In 1975, the book was made into The UFO Incident, a television movie starring James Earl Jones.
Coming closer.
It is not. It is not coming closer. It's just way up there. Betty, what are you trying to make me believe?
What are our criteria for alien abduction?
According to the people who study this, the abductee has to be taken against his or her will. 2, the aliens have to transport the abductee somewhere, usually to a quote-unquote mothership. Finally, the person is returned to wherever the person has experienced some missing time, like Betty and Barney Hill.
To me, the problem is you get various people making these claims that they've been abducted, and the media tends to pick up on these things. And then it publishes this, which sort of propagates the myth of what the little green men should look like and what the saucers should look like. People read that, and then people have their own experiences, and they tend to fit it to that, and it seems to be kind of a vicious cycle that propagates the myth.
Although thousands of UFO abductions have been reported, the vast majority of cases have been dismissed as bogus. But the Betty and Barney Hill case has, to this day, remained an open mystery. According to the team, there is something quite different about this case. Real physical evidence was left behind.
There were highly polished spots on the trunk of the vehicle.
There were large shiny spots on the trunk of the car,
about the size of silver dollars.
Fortunately, we also had a neighbor who was a physicist, and he recommended that Betty take a compass out around the car to see how the needle of the compass would react.
Just got the compass anywhere near them. The compass kept spinning around and around and around.
you would place the compass anywhere other than on the spots, it would just flop down.
Betty Hill's story is that there was some sort of physical scuffle during the course of the episode. So then you ask the question, well, what does the dress look like? The dress is physically damaged. The zipper is torn off. Some of the fabric is actually dislocated. There are contaminants on the fabric, stains all over.
If extraterrestrials left something on her fabric, would that still show up?
It's been 40 years, so there will be a certain amount of deterioration or decay of any samples that are on there.
The substance involved is a powdery pink substance on Betty's dress. What could it be? Is it an actual substance excreted by an alien? Was it something that was on the ship that she rubbed against?
Could be proteins or enzymes.
And how would you know if something is extraterrestrial?
We're just looking for anomalies.
Betty Hill's niece has agreed to turn over 2 samples of the dress to the team for testing, a control sample and a contaminated sample. Dr. Ted Ackworth brings the samples to Phyllis Budinger, a highly respected chemical analyst with decades of experience with British Petroleum. She analyzes the dress, looking for any trace of the mysterious pink powder and any other anomalies in the fabric.
What do we have here?
A clipping from the left sleeve of Betty's dress, and this is the control. It retains the original color of the dress.
The hypothesis is that the stain is something to do with the abduction event.
Yes, the dress material was stained. There's very, very little of this material on the control sample. So this tells me that whatever's on there came from an external source. It absolutely did not come from Betty.
Potentially having some sort of residual material, or...
It might be.
First, she looked at it under a microscope to get a high magnification view of it.
You're going to see that compared to the control, the stain swab has a less ordered weave, and there's more spaces between the knit rows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see the greater spacing between the knit rows.
Yeah,
on
and
the contaminated
if you look closely, it's been disturbed.
Through microscopic analysis, Phyllis has detected areas of unusual strain and distress in the fabric of Betty's dress.
The fabric clearly is mechanically dislocated compared to the control sample. Everything that I see is consistent with an explanation of there being a physical struggle between the wearer of the dress and someone else.
Could this be evidence of Betty Hill's claim that she struggled against the alleged abductors in her attempt to escape?
Why don't we move on to the spectroscopic analysis? That sounded pretty interesting too.
Infrared is a very, very powerful technique. It's used for molecular structure identification. Each infrared spectrum of a molecule is unique.